Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, today's video, we are going to be talking about everything you need to know about wall decor. So this is a very common question where people don't know what to do with their walls because they're tired of the plain blank walls. Some of you are looking behind me and going, yep, some of those walls look pretty blank too. Listen, I get it. We all struggle with them because a wall, you know, a big white wall, big blank wall, it's just got a world of possibilities, but sometimes we don't know what to do with it. And so we just leave it blank. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. So let's break it down. Everything you need to know about how to create beautiful walls so that they sort of set the backdrop for the rest of your space. Because you can have gorgeous furniture, but if your walls are boring, it's probably not gonna look that interesting. Let's get going. Okay, first up on my list, when talking about beautiful wall decor, is going to be texture and dimension and the importance of both. I am a firm believer that if you have the opportunity to do some interesting texture or some moldings or whatever on your wall, it's going to make a massive difference. Because like I said in the intro, the walls are the backdrop that sort of kind of like fade in to the rest of your design. So, you know, everything is layered in front of the walls. That's the point where your eye hits to define the rest of the space. That is the point where, you know, everything sits within there. It clearly defines the room, defines the space that you're working with. So I think having something really interesting on those walls makes a massive difference in creating a beautiful space. Oftentimes people really love to do the sexy stuff, and that oftentimes means going to Home Goods or going to Target and just sort of throwing some stuff in the cart and going, oh, this is cute, and then chucking it in their space and going, but why doesn't this all work together, you know? And sometimes part of that is because those walls provide a lot of opportunity to be really interesting. So what am I talking about when I say wall dimension and texture? Things like wallpaper, things like wall treatments, things like panel moldings, things like crown moldings, things like baseboards, things like chair rails, things like wainscoting. Do you know what I mean? Board and batten, whatever you got going on there, like interesting paint even onto it, things like lime wash, right? Things like wood, using like wood paneling. I know some people are really scared of wood paneling, and you should be, because if it goes wrong, it goes really wrong and it's expensive and hard to undo. But I do think that having beautiful raw wood walls is amazing, or, you know, having some gorgeous finishing carpentry on that wall can make a huge difference to make a space feel a lot more interesting. By just elevating those walls, I hate the word elevating, but here we are. It's such a designery, stupid word, right? But you get me. We're elevating those walls and making them feel a little bit more special so that we can start to layer those furniture pieces over top, and it's gonna start to be a lot more interesting, and those art pieces and all those things. So start with the wall that you actually have before we get to what we're gonna put on those walls, and start thinking, do moldings make sense for my style? Do baseboards, does wallpaper, does lime wash, does Roman clay, right? Those are a little bit different, although texturally, oftentimes they kind of feel quite similar. You know, does it make sense for me to have some finishing carpentry on the wall? Can I afford it? Because that's really expensive if you wanna do it with high quality finishes, right? Those things will add some materiality into the space. They will make it feel texturally more interesting because there's like a tactile sensation when you look at those walls, which is going to be a lot more interesting than white drywall. So adding that plays with shadow in interesting ways with the light, and just makes it feel a lot more interesting. And that's kind of the baseline that we're really working with before we start layering stuff on the walls, before we start putting in the furniture, before we start putting in the decor. Okay, so next up. So you did, or you might have just completely ignored my advice, which is fair, because a lot of people just do, and that's really fine. People are just here for making fun of things from HomeSense, and that's really why you come to the channel, and I totally respect it, even if you didn't actually change your walls at all, see point one, but that's okay. Let's just assume that you did, and you've put some moldings up, in which case now you're like, what now, Nick? What now? This is where you're gonna start to add in some art. And art is really personal, but there are lots of different things. I want to rethink what it means to put art on your walls, because not everything necessarily needs to be like, heaven forbid, an art piece that you found when you were shopping at Target or HomeSense, right? Because you did what I said you shouldn't do, and you went and you started shopping and you bought some furniture and you bought some decor, and then you also picked up some generic wall art while you were there. Well, art should feel personal. It should feel something that really speaks to you, and I think you should get really creative in terms of what you choose to call art, because I think there's some really beautiful pieces out there. You can turn, you know, old postcards that you find, you can take prints that you thrifted, you can take other people's dead relatives that you find at a garage sale, and you can frame that sucker and you can throw that on the wall. That's interesting. You could make your own. Maybe if you're super talented, unlike me, you can go DIY yourself something really special, and that's really cool. Yes, you're just gonna go on Instagram Reels and you're gonna find something that somebody else did and you're gonna copy it so it doesn't feel all that personal, but it's personal to you and no one ever needs to see that reels anyway, right? Like you're making it up, you're making it yourself. If you're talented and you're an artist, fantastic. If you're a photographer, take some beautiful photos and get those blown up. You can do that. Like there's stores that still do that right now in 2024, right? Like I'm sure they still exist. Go out there, find those different art pieces, thrift them, find them, garage sale, whatever. You know, I have like this one that I'm gonna show you right over here. Insert some stuff of me showing this art piece off. This is actually like an old trolley, like the little things that they had on the trolleys here in Vancouver. And my grandpa like rescued it. He was a hoarder, but he like rescued it back in, I wanna say like 50 years ago or something. And when they ripped up all the trolleys, which they shouldn't have done, but that's, whatever, that's me getting a little bit more into transportation infrastructure here in the city. But you know, they got rid of it and they shouldn't have. And he rescued all these rolls of things and sat in his basement for 50 years. And then I repurposed it and I had it professionally framed and now it's gorgeous. And now it's lovely. And it's such a huge statement piece to have here in my living room. And I love it. And it's personal and it means something to me and it's creative and it's interesting and it's cool. The clock, the controversial clock that you either love or you hate in the comment section. Yes, I don't change the batteries. And no, I'm not going to because I don't care. Now, if I did, there would be mutiny in the comment section. So, you know, that you might hate it, you might love it. It doesn't matter. I like it. I bought it from CV2 like years ago and I just really liked it. And I don't care if you hate it because it's mine. So find art that is personal to you, that means something to you, and make sense for your space. Also be creative with things like 3D things as well. Like, so you could have sculptural pieces that make sense to put on your walls. That's really cool. Mirrors also can act as art in a sense, right? So having a cool space to put on your walls, and you might have a blank white wall, but you're like, you know what? It's not particularly artistic necessarily, it's super functional. And so a mirror might make a lot of sense, right? What else have you got? There's lots of things you can do. Textured art, tapestries or rugs even can make a lot of sense. They provide a really interesting, cozy sort of texture. They're also wonderful for soundproofing as well. I love rugs in a living room. I put rugs pretty much anywhere I can. They're really great for dampening sound, to make a space feel a lot more cozy, a lot more homey when you have rugs in them, which I just personally love, but even putting them on the wall can be super gorgeous. So consider tapestries or rugs or things like that that you can hang on walls. That's gorgeous. Now you're adding texture and soundproofing and interest and intrigue into your space. We're having a good time. Actually, like speaking of interesting tapestries, this brand, Akashi like reached out to me. They just small little cute brands always reach out to me and I always think they're really interesting to see what people are working on. They do these like interesting tapestries that you can use as wall decor or you can use to cover like for privacy. Like if you want to cover like a little laundry area or you want to cover something that's like a little bit more exposed and you don't want to show it off, like it's a really cute little Japanese American sort of solution, which is really, really cute. There's lots of different ones out there. There's lots of really cool tapestries and rugs that you can use. This is just a really cool one that I thought was really neat. I'll link it below that they sent me because they do it all made to order. So I'll just link it. But like stuff like that is really cool, like where people are embracing different forms of wall decor that are much more textural than we saw before, which I think is really neat. Definitely on trend because we're seeing so much more texture everywhere. Why not on your walls? Okay, next up, everything you need to know about walls. How high to hang things. Okay, so that's really important. I have in the past, and rightfully so, Nick from the past didn't make a bad decision by doing this, but like given you general advice on like the height of where wall pieces should go, I think it's important to caution that for a second. It also really, not everything can explain in a video on the internet, okay? Especially a TikTok that's 15 seconds long. So cut me some slack here. But like traditionally, art should be like somewhere in the 57 to 60 inches above from the ground to the middle of the art, or maybe 4 to 6 inches or so above a sofa or a side table or whatever you got going on there, some sort of case goods. If you decide to put like art above it or something, aim for about 6 inches or so. But here's the thing, it really depends on a bunch of different factors. So there is no hard and fast rule. The size of the art matters, okay? If it's huge and it's taking up, you know, a big chunk of the wall, you know, 57 to 60 might not make sense. If you've got really low furniture, 4 to 6 inches above might not make sense. It might just be way, way, way too low and you might want to go a little bit taller. Maybe something more like 10 inches might make sense. You know, it depends on a bunch of different factors, but that's a loose guideline. The point is though, is that it should be roughly in the scale of the rest of the space. So if you have super, super tall ceilings, having larger art probably is going to make more sense because it's going to look more proportional to the rest of the wall, right? So that stuff makes a lot of sense. What else are we talking here, right? Like it depends, people oftentimes, typically, will put art too high. That's very, very common to hang it too high. Now you might say, I'm a tall person. Cool, great. If you're 7 feet tall, you might want to hang it a little bit on the taller side so that you can enjoy it. But just remember, most people aren't 7 feet tall. And so you gotta kind of position it so that it looks right for the space that it's in, because if it's way up there, people are gonna be like, wow, what a beautiful tapestry you have up there, right? It might look a little bit weird. But this is where sometimes there's an art and science to design, because sometimes that might make sense if you've got super tall ceilings and that's where you're choosing to put put a large scale piece of art. So yes, there's some science to this where it does look really silly if you take a little tiny little art piece and you just hang it way high in the corner, or you have a giant wall and you put a little tiny postcard in the middle. That's gonna look weird. But there's some art involved as well. So you're gonna have to use your judgment a little bit here. Don't hang it too high, don't hang it way too small, don't hang it too big. Like just work with like almost like a rule of 2/3, okay? Something should take up roughly 2/3 of whatever it's sort of centered against. That's a good rough rule. So, you know, if you got a piece of art, consider that it should take up roughly 2/3 of the wall that it's on. I think that's a pretty good rule. But again, rules are made to be broken. So this felt unhelpful, but maybe it was. Hopefully. Okay, now let's move on to gallery walls. Okay, a gallery wall is 100% an option, and I gave this its own category because I know you're gonna do one. So I did a whole video on gallery walls. Feel free to check it out. So that, if you need this section, I'm gonna go a little bit more in detail here, of course, because that's why it's in the video and that's the one that you're watching. But if you want more, go look at that one. Gallery walls. Okay, my biggest tip with gallery walls, you guys, is first of all, take into account the whole gallery wall when deciding the space and the size of it versus the rest of the wall. Okay, so you might be inclined to go, here's a little photo and we're gonna like put this in my gallery wall, and that feels like it makes sense for the size of the wall, but take into account the whole gallery wall experience. Treat it like it's one piece of art, then work with that when deciding sort of the size and scale that will make sense for the space. Because so often people overcrowd these things because they're like, but it's not that big of a deal because they're just tiny little pieces. Yes, but when you put 50 tiny little pieces on a wall, it starts to feel really overwhelming, and you're starting to hang things like from the ceiling and they're right there hugging up against the baseboards, and that's maybe a little bit much. I would say define the space, make sure that the whole gallery wall is taken into account when choosing how much space it should take up. Also, choose varied, interesting images for your gallery wall. Not everything necessarily, you know, if you want to go with something super contemporary and you want everything in the same frame, that can be really cute. But if you want to go for something that leans a little bit more eclectic in style, then yes, incorporate in different frames, different pieces of art that might not typically necessarily make a whole lot of sense together, but that's going to be a little bit more on the eclectic style side. If you want something where everybody's like black and white photography in an all black frame, it's going to read very contemporary, that's fine, you can do that. But if you want something that leans more eclectic, choose varying things. Things like three-dimensional things are really fun to mix into to a gallery wall. You don't just have to stick to picture frames just because that feels like it necessarily makes sense. You can also incorporate all those different art pieces that I talked about earlier. Postcards from trips that you've had, 3D sort of masks or something that you've collected from some weird thrift shop or something, right? All that stuff can make sense, along with photography and art and things like that can also be mixed in. Nothing says amateur hour in your gallery wall quite like things not being spaced properly between them, allowing a sufficient amount of white space for each individual piece to breathe, while also not too much so that it doesn't, like, it looks like it's all part of the same collection. Again, I feel like I'm being vague, but I can't tell you how to, unless I come to your house and show you how to do your gallery wall. It's just, that's what we have to work with here on the internet. So make sure that it's sufficient enough that everything breathes, but not, so you don't want things too tight, but you won't want things too loose. Just that little Goldilocks where everything looks cohesive, it looks like it all belongs together, and everything breathes and nothing looks overwhelming. That's what we're after here with this gallery. No, frames should not be touching. Let's just set that straight right now. And then my last tip for you with walls, having said now, we've got mirrors, we've got textured art, we've got tapestries, we've got gallery walls, we've got wainscoting. I mean, I have given you so many ideas on what to do with your walls. You're like, Nick, but I don't know, I don't have enough walls. And that's true. You honestly, once you realize the wild world of walls, at the beginning, you're like, I don't know what to do with any of these walls. And by the end, you're like, I have too many things I want to do and not enough walls to do them on. It just becomes that much fun. Because there's like, honestly, you can get really creative. And if you're going high end, you're doing a whole renovation, you could do walls that are made out of freaking stone. Like you can put natural stone on there. You can put like, there's so many different interesting materials and wallpapers and things you can do. It's so much fun. So you are gonna have a lot of time with walls. But my last tip for you is going to be the opposite of all that, which is to say, not every wall needs to be filled. There is also importance to making sure that you have enough negative space in your home. So what is positive space? What is negative space? Well, if you took my interior design course, you would know, but you know, here I'll just tell you. Positive space is where you have things that are taking up space, right? So the art that we're talking about, those tapestries, all that stuff is positive space. It's adding to the room. Negative space is the absence of all that stuff. And both are equally important. And I think when there's too much negative space, it feels a little cold, it feels a little boring. That would obviously lean more towards minimalism. But in my experience, sometimes that, you know, having all negative space and no positive space can feel a bit insane asylum, right? So when everything is positive space though, it can feel cluttered and overwhelming. So negative space is also really important. So that negative space I talked about in between those gallery wall photos, that's negative space, right? So when I say space to breathe, that's what we're talking about. But the same is true for the whole space. Just because you've got a gallery wall over here and you've got some wainscoting over here and you put some moldings over there and you've got art pieces layered over top of your moldings, because yes, you can do that. It's a wonderful look. You can absolutely put your moldings all in and then layer in art over top of it. I love that. Because again, the wall is the backdrop. But you can also have negative space where you don't have anything at all, right? And that's really important, is to leave some space blank so that everything has room to breathe. You have room to breathe. It doesn't feel overwhelming, never feels cluttered. And overall, it creates a more balanced space because you've got positive space happening, you've got negative, and everything sort of works harmoniously together to create something really gorgeous. So don't think that everything needs to be filled, but also don't leave everything blank. This video had a lot of vagueness of like, don't do this or this, the answer lies somewhere in the middle, but that's the nature of walls, you know? Like, I'm sorry, and that's design. There's an art and science to it. So good luck with that. But yeah, I would say don't fill everything with every surface needs a thing. Not every table needs decor. Not every wall needs art. Not everything needs everything. Sometimes things can just be, and that creates a balanced, harmonious space that you're going to love. So definitely negative space is important. Okay, so that is it for today, you guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I'm gonna link here to the gallery wall video because you knew it was coming. Because if you are thinking about designing a gallery wall, and I know you are because people freaking love them, in or out, people love a gallery wall. I don't care, they just do. Go check out that video. It has a lot more depth than I was able to cover in here, and good luck with that. And I will see you all in the next video. Thanks, bye.